What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here, and I'm going to show you how I'll be setting up my fantasy cruncher for the Monday Night Football game between the Buccaneers and the Cowboys. I'll be setting up here for the largest field GPP on FanDuel. First thing I'm going to do is rearrange my columns. I've got a quick view saved so I can see what I want to see in the middle of my screen, that being ownership projection, my projection, exposure cap, and then how much I get of players once I have run a crunch. While you're coming in, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification button if you want to get alerts when our shows go live. All right, next thing I'm going to do is remove players from my player pool who have a projection of 0. This is going to save me some time as I'm making some groups later. Players with zeros don't show up, so you don't have to wade through them to find the relevant players when you're making groups. There we go. And then finally, before I get into advanced options, I'll go to the MVP tab, set an exposure cap on all players at 20%. This is going to diversify my lineups a little bit. Now I'm not going to get more than 20% of any one player in the MVP spot. So I'm going to have at least 5 different MVPs in my lineups. I think there's enough star power on this slate that makes sense. All right, next I'm going to go into advanced options. And I'm going to be working in 2 tabs here, the general tab and the groups tab. Starting in the general tab, unique players per lineup. I'm setting up for a 150 lineup set here, so I'm going to leave this at 1 unique players per lineup. If I were making 40 or fewer lineups, I would consider changing this to 2 unique players per lineup just for the sake of diversifying my lineups. Team salary cap, not going to set a minimum. I will set a maximum. Once again, this is just for the purpose of avoiding the most duplicated lineups. Doesn't make my lineups better, doesn't make them project better, more likely to win. It just makes it more likely that if I do win, which takes a lot of luck regardless of how good your lineup is, if I do win, I'm going to be more likely to win thousands, tens of thousands of dollars rather than winning $1,000. So that's my goal, is to make lineups that when they win are going to win big. So I'm going to set a salary cap here to avoid some of those most duplicated lineups. I'll use a salary cap here of $58,500, leaving $1,500 on the table rather than using the $60,000 salary cap that FanDuel allows. Offensive players versus defense, default is set to a max of 2 players. I'm going to change this to 4 players, so I can theoretically have 4 players from one team against just one against the defense of the opposing team. We have seen that win this year. It can win. It's not something the field loves to do, so it's something that I like to do to potentially avoid some duplication. Global exposure cap, I'm going to leave at 100%. I already changed in the MVP spot to 20%. Randomness, I'm going to set to 30%. If you want more control over your lineups, use a lower number here. I know some people who use even 0 randomness. They want to have complete control over their lineups. That's not my process. I like to include a little bit of randomness in the process. Minimum projection included in calculation, the default is set to 3. I'm going to leave it at 3. And if there's a player who I want in my player pool who projects for fewer than 3 fantasy points, I'm just going to manually boost their projection to above 3. Players from each team max, the default is set to 4. I'm going to leave it at 4. So I could have 4 players from one team against just 1 player from the opposing team. That's it for the general tab. Now I'll move into the groups tab. And generally the groups that I make are related to the quarterbacks. Those are the groups that I think are the most necessary for these slates. And it's just because of the scoring on these fantasy sites. On every site that I know of, the receiver scores more fantasy points than the quarterback on every passing play, both in terms of they get half point per reception, which the quarterback obviously doesn't get. They also get more points per yard, more points per touchdown. So it's kind of important to be mindful of the scoring when you're setting some groups. I'm going to start by making a Dak MVP group. I'm going to find here's Dak in the MVP spot, make him my key player. So this group all revolves around Dak MVP lineups. Now I'm going to sort by position and add all of these Cowboys receivers to a secondary group. And I'm including running backs as pass catchers here. All right, that'll do it for the group. So the reason that these groups are important, as I said, is because of the scoring dynamics. If Dak Prescott is throwing the ball too much to one receiver, that receiver is likely to outscore him. In the MVP spot, it goes without saying, he's going to need to put up a lot of fantasy points. Dak has a little bit of rushing upside. He's rushed for about 15 yards per game this year. But in general, he's not, an elite rusher. So most of his fantasy points are likely to be scored through the air. And if he's scoring fantasy points through the air, he's throwing for a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns. Again, if it's all concentrated on one receiver, that receiver likely to outscore him, be optimal in the MVP instead of Dak. So typically, I prefer to have multiple receivers from the Cowboys in lineups where I have Dak in the MVP spot, but I'm not going to force it. As I said, he has a little bit of rushing upside, so it doesn't all have to be through the air. I am going to require at least one pass catcher from the Cowboys, so I'm leaving this rule exactly as is. If key players use, so that's Dak in the MVP spot, use at least one player from this group. And then I'm also going to give boosts to these pass catchers in these Dak MVP lineups. More likely that I get to multiple. All right, that'll do it for the Dak MVP group. Next, I'm going to make a Brady MVP group. You know what I did immediately the first time I won 6 figures in a DFS contest? I converted my trial membership to Stokastic, awesome at the time, to a full annual subscription. That's because I knew these were the best tools in the industry. That was 2019, and they've gotten even better since then. Well, good news, you can get access to these same tools without winning 6 figures first with a great offer from BetMGM. You can get 2 months of Stokastic Plus Platinum when you sign up, deposit, and bet at least $10. That's every tool on the site for every sport other than Fantasy Cruncher, a $240 value. All you need to do is click the link in the description of this video, follow the steps, and deposit $10 or more, and place a bet of $10 or more on whatever you want. And when that bet settles, MGM will hit you up with how to get your subscription to Stokastic. You don't even need to win the bet. On top of all that, you also get bet insurance on your first bet up to $1,000. That means if you win the bet, you get the money. If you lose the bet, you still get your money back and site credits. It's a great deal from BetMGM and a long trial subscription to the best DFS tools out there. The legal age for gambling in most states is 21 plus, and if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Reminder, make sure you use the link or use promo code PLATINUMSUB or we won't be able to track you. So I'll find Tom Brady in the MVP spot, make him my key player, and then add all of these Bucs pass catchers in the flex. All right, and then Tom Brady, very, very little rushing upside. He rushes for like 2 yards per game. He has 1 rushing touchdown in the year, so he does have a little bit of rushing upside. Just, anytime a quarterback is capable of scoring a touchdown, that's 6 fantasy points. That doesn't require any pass catcher on the play. So he has a little bit of that rushing upside. I think that you could reasonably just say use at least 2 with Tom Brady, just require 2 pass catchers. But again, 1 rushing touchdown and what, I don't know if he played every game this year, even if it's 17, if it's a 1 in 17 chance of getting a 6-point fantasy spike from a rushing touchdown, that is some rushing upside. So I am actually going to leave this at 1 player from this group, but then once again, give boost to make it more likely that I get to multiple. All right, and then finally, I'm going to make a couple groups related to the quarterbacks in the flex. So starting with back in the flex. Make him my key player. I think you could even consider not making this group because I think Dak has, enough rushing upside to be used naked in the flex because he doesn't necessarily need to score that many points to be optimal in the flex. But he does still need. I don't know. It's a tough call whether you need to make this group on Dak Prescott. I would definitely make it on DraftKings, but on FanDuel because it's only half point per reception. It's a little bit more plausible for Dak to be optimal without bringing along a pass catcher if he spreads the ball around, especially with all these tight end options for the Cowboys. They have a lot of different pass catchers. He could be spreading the ball around too. But I lean towards making this group requiring at least one pass catcher in my Dak flex groups. Oh, had Scotty Miller by accident. Okay. All right. And this is all I'm doing for this group. I'm saying if I have Dak Prescott in the flex, I want to require at least one pass catcher from the Cowboys somewhere else in my lineup. And again, because he's in the flex now, I can include those Cowboys in the MVP spot as well. That's all I'm doing for this group. No boosts or anything. And then same thing for Brady. Brady in the flex, making my key player. And then I'll add all of these Bucs pass catchers. Now I can include them in the MVP spot. Okay. Same thing. Not giving any boosts or anything. I'm just saying if I've got Tom Brady in the flex, I want at least one pass catcher from the Buccaneers somewhere in my lineup. That'll do it for this group. And now I'm going to crunch out 150 lineups, see what they look like. So the first step of my process done, that is creating groups for correlations, setting some rules to avoid duplication. Now the next part of my process is just looking at the lineups, evaluating whether I need to change those groups because I want to look at the lineup, see if they correlate well enough. If they don't, then I might go back and make some adjustments to those groups. And then B, I want to go and look at my player exposures, make sure I'm getting to about how much I want of each player. So first I'm going to start by looking at these lineups. First lineup I see is Tom Brady in the MVP spot with multiple pass catchers, Evans, Godwin, and Fournette. Looks good to me. Next, I've got Dak Prescott in the MVP spot with just one pass catcher in the flex. I think that's okay. As I said, he's got a little bit of rushing upside, about 15 yards per game. Sometimes quarterbacks will run a little bit more in the playoffs when they really need to run to pick up some first downs. They're a little bit more willing to. So I don't know. I think he's got some rushing upside. I think I'm okay with just one pass catcher in the flex. Here we've got Dak with CD. Looks good. Dak with CD. And as you can see, as I'm talking about this, I'm really only concerned with the quarterbacks, making sure the quarterbacks look well enough because every other player is essentially independent, is scoring fantasy points independent. They're not reliant on other players for their scoring as much. I mean, obviously, pass catchers are reliant on the quarterback for their scoring, but they're outscoring the quarterback on each of those plays. So they're more likely to be optimal without the quarterback than vice versa. Here we've got Tom Brady with just Leonard Fournette. Again, I think it's okay on FanDuel in particular. I've seen lineups, good players make lineups sometimes, even with statuesque quarterbacks like Brady, do make lineups with them in the flex without any pass catchers. It's very counterintuitive to me, very unlikely for that kind of thing to work out, but it can work out on FanDuel in particular. If the quarterback's spreading the ball around, there's no point per reception. It is more likely for a quarterback to be optimal without pass catchers. So if he has just one and it's Leonard Fournette, I guess I'm okay with that. Here we've got Brady with Fournette again, Dak with Gallup. Really not getting quite as many pass catchers as I would expect with my quarterback. Brady with Fournette. All right, so one thing I could do, go back into my groups and give bigger boosts to those pass catchers. Maybe not change it to requiring two, but at least give bigger boosts to pass catchers in lineups that have Brady in them. But before I do that, I want to just check my player exposure. Sometimes these things work themselves out because I might just not have many of those pass catchers in my lineups in general. So first I want to check my exposures. 35% Dak, 47% Brady seems fine. 10% Pollard. Getting to 53% Leonard Fournette. That seems high. Only 5% Rachaad White. So now this is the next part of my process, is just making incremental adjustments to my projections to get closer to the exposure levels that I like for different players. So Tony Pollard, maybe give him a little bit of a boost. I should sort by salary here. All right, well, I can see here Tony Pollard is $2,000 more expensive than Leonard Fournette. If I give him a projection of 11, he still projects worse than Leonard Fournette. So given the salary discrepancy, I might, if I want a little bit more Tony Pollard in my lineups, I'll have to give him a projection of higher than 11, most likely. Zeke, also more expensive than Leonard Fournette. I'm probably okay with getting less of Zeke than Leonard Fournette, but maybe I want more than 13%. So maybe give him a little bit of a boost. Rachaad White not getting much at all. Probably want more than that of Rachaad White. Oops. Wide receivers getting to a good amount. 25% CD seems fine. Not getting to much Mike Evans. Maybe I want a little bit more there. A little boost. Where he is. Gallup looks fine. Not getting much Gage. If I bring him up to, so I'm getting 23% Gallup. He's the same price as Gage. If I bring Gage up closer to that Gallup projection, I'll get closer to that 23%. 1% T.Y. Hilton. I don't know if the field's only getting to 2%. Maybe I'd have a little bit of interest. Potential long touchdown or something. Same thing with Julio. Yeah, if the field's only at 1.5%, I'm going to have interest there, I think. And then Scotty Miller, not currently in my player pool because he's projecting for just 1 fantasy point. Needs to be at least 3 to be in the player pool. Maybe I'll give him a projection of 3. I think I'm going to leave Devin Tompkins out of my player pool. And then tight ends. Okay, so here's, I'm only getting to 18% Dalton Schultz. Maybe that's fine. 18%, not too little. But then K-Dot only getting 2%, not getting to any Cameron Brate. I don't know. I think I have more. If the field's only going to get to 8% K-Dot, I think I'll have some interest in getting above that. So I'm actually going to give him a bigger projection boost than I've given elsewhere. And then maybe I'll get these other guys just into my player pool. So getting a 48% Brett Maher, 25% Ryan Suckup. That might kind of explain why I'm getting to a lot of lineups without multiple pass catchers. And not getting much of the defenses. Maybe I'll give a little bit of a boost to the defenses. Then crunch again. All right, so just looking at the lineups to start. Tom Brady at MVP with multiple pass catchers looks good. Dak at MVP with multiple pass catchers looks good. Brady with Godwin, like that. Brady with Godwin and Fournette looks good. Brady with Evans, Godwin, Fournette looks good. Not getting as much Dak now, it looks like. Dak with multiple, Brady with multiple. Okay, I'm liking the way these are looking a little bit better now as I'm just getting to a little bit more of the pass catchers. This is interesting. Brady with both of his running backs. They are both fairly involved in the passing game. I think it's viable. Brady, Evans, Godwin, Fournette. Yeah. Dak with multiple pass catchers, Brady with Godwin. I think these are all looking fine to me. I don't have any. I think these are looking better than my lineups were before. I'm now generally getting Brady with multiple pass catchers when he's in the MVP spot. Brady with Fournette, it's a little bit thin, but Fournette is a bit involved as a pass catcher. I think these are looking okay to me. So correlation's looking better. And then just looking through, okay, still not getting much of the defenses. Still getting a good amount of the kickers, but I think it's come down slightly. Okay, a little bit more K-Dot, and it's good. So I think we're getting a little bit closer to where I want to be. Maybe I bring these guys up a little bit. These guys up a little bit. And now I'm getting a little bit more of these running backs. Anyway, this is just an incremental process. I just go over and over, crunch over and over until I get to exposure levels that I like for each player and lineups that correlate well. And I think I'm getting closer and closer to those levels, evening out the exposure a little bit, trying to get to a little bit more of these contrarian players, guys like Julio. If he's only going to be 1.5%, I think I'm going to have interest and just keep bumping him up until I get above the field to a level that I want to be on each of these players. But I'm not going to crunch it out a million times. I'll just show you now. So I gave a little boop bump. Now I'm getting at least above the field on Julio since I gave him that bump. And this is just the process, just over and over until I get to exposure levels that I like. And of course, always double checking, are my lineups correlating well enough? And I think these ones are looking fine. Dak with multiple, Brady with just Rashad White. Again, he's involved enough in the passing game that I think it's viable. So in general, I think these lineups are looking viable. They're looking pretty well correlated here. I would consider at some point, if I get too many of these lineups that are like just Brady with Fournette, just Brady with Rashad White, I might go back and just remove those running backs. But honestly, I think I'm not getting to so many that I want to do that at this point. I think I'm getting a reasonable amount of Brady with just a running back. It's close. I'm getting a little bit. Anyway, that is the process. Just making sure my lineups correlate well, that I'm getting to exposure levels that I like, and then hoping for the best. So hope you can find some success tonight using this or a similar process. Good luck.